I'm Victoria Galley.
Hi, I'm Abhijit Mane.
And today we're going to be talking about different political issues, what's relevant in today's news, and local issues. So first up, I'd just like to introduce Abhijit. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Abhijit, and I'm the Deputy Leader of the Green Party of Ontario. I have been doing this for about a year and a half now, and I love being part of this party, which is a grassroots organization that's doing something for the planet, for people, and for our future.
Absolutely. So can you tell me more about the actual position of Deputy Leader of the Green Party of Ontario?
Right. So essentially, it's I have another co-deputy leader. Her name's Bonnie North, and the both of us are the deputy leaders of the party. We're both essentially second in command after Mike Schreiner.
And who's that?
And
for
Mike
our
Schreiner
viewers?
is the leader of the Green Party of Ontario and the first Green MPP elected in Queen's Park.
Woo!
So absolutely doing a fantastic job there. But we essentially are a part of the leadership of the party, and we represent the party at different venues, whether it's at media events, whether it's at different public events, and we also are spokespeople for the party. And as deputy leader, we also sit on the Provincial Executive, which is the governing body of the Green Party of Ontario. And we are also co-chairs of the Shadow Cabinet, which each is assigned different portfolios.
Perfect. So speaking of that, what is your Shadow Cabinet position, and can you tell me about it?
Yeah, so I've been assigned the Health and Long-Term Care portfolio, and it's one of the most important ones, and absolutely something that I find something very close to my heart and something I'm very passionate about. The healthcare system in Ontario is under such pressures right now, and I think one of the biggest issues facing it is just the long wait times that we're experiencing. Whether that's hallway healthcare as they've dubbed it. So one of the things that the Greens have always advocated for is the fact that in order to relieve the pressure off of hospitals, we need to ensure that there's enough infrastructure, health infrastructure, at the local level. So that means more nurse practitioner clinics, that means more home care, that means more tertiary healthcare centers, which can provide the kind of local healthcare, so that if people have, the little things that don't necessarily need to be treated at emergency rooms, then they can go to these local hubs and be treated there rather than create existing pressures on our healthcare system.
Yeah, which would be great for more remote and regional areas as well. That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
So there is a local and current health issue here in Hamilton that we're worrying about, as there recently was 24 billion liters of raw sewage spill at Cootes Paradise, and it's created extreme unsafe swimming levels as well as boating level conditions and a dying marine life. What are your thoughts on this issue?
I mean, it's not just a health issue as well, but it's also a transparency issue, because both provincial and municipal governments were not transparent with the people of Ontario about what had transpired.
Exactly.
And actually, the Green Party of Ontario and many different civil activists essentially had organized a cleaning drive in the city of Hamilton around Cootes Paradise, just to raise awareness about this issue. And it did raise quite a bit of awareness. The Spectator came out, a lot of different civil associations came out. And so we need to make sure that Hamiltonians are kept safe. It is a massive public health disaster because as we've noticed before with Walkerton, water is one of our most precious resources, and if we are complacent about it, then all sorts of tragedies can occur in the future, which is also why Mike's first bill ever at Queen's Park was about water protection, because Greens do realize that water is one of the most precious resources out there, and also one of the most strained resources out there, because in the future, water crises, you even see it all around the world today, water shortages, and all sorts of crises surrounding water. So we need to ensure that our future generations have that kind of resource intact.
Yeah, so the Coots cover up, if you search that, pops up with our article. So we hosted a cleanup in Coots Paradise, and we had Don McLean. He's a big, strong environmental activist with 350.org. And so we co-hosted, and we had a ton of media come out. So I hope you check out that coverage of the event as well, because it really draws attention to the important issues, which transitions us into the fact of pipelines, because we can't, not only can we not get water to our First Nations in our country, but we have the issue of a massive pipeline coming through Wet'suwet'en territory, but we also have a local pipeline trying to come in now. So right now we have the Enbridge pipeline that is trying to cross through our protected wetlands of Bronte Creek, Spencer Creek, and the Hamilton Conservation Area. And so can you tell us the Green Party stance on this issue and pipelines in general around the country?
Right, yeah. The nation's eyes are trained on Coastal Link right now, but it's important to notice that there's a pipeline trying to be rammed through right here in Ontario, and the Enbridge pipeline is carrying fracked gas, which in itself is such an environmental disaster, and so in order to meet our Paris climate targets, if we keep building on more fossil fuel projects, if we keep building more essentially just relying more on fossil fuel energy resources, then it becomes very hard to meet those targets. So I don't quite understand why this government, whether provincial or federal, is endorsing this at all. And instead, having all that money go into renewables is a much better strategy of being able to meet our goals. There's obviously a lot of pressure being exerted on governments by lots of oil and gas lobbies, essentially, that exist. And so it's hard for, especially political status quo parties, to be able to uproot that, which is why I think it's important that parties like the Greens, who aren't status quo, who want to shake things up, need to get in legislature more. So we need even more Green MPPs and Green MPs in Parliament who can stand up to that kind of bullying.
Yeah, absolutely. So recently, you'll see on this YouTube channel as well, I spoke to the Hamilton City Council about staying on as an intervener in the Ontario Energy Board to say no to the pipeline. So I hope you checked out that clip as well. There's also a petition on the Green Party of Ontario's website to pressure the minister to not allow the pipeline to be built. So I hope you check that out. It's extremely important because not only do we have the actual issue of the pipeline spillage, but also the blasting that occurs. So we're talking about more than a 10-lane highway just to clear enough room for the construction to occur to build the pipeline itself. And then they will add in regrowth afterwards, but that initial blast will makes endangered species suffer, and also just our overall marine life, because this is a wetlands. It's the best and protected wetlands in all of the Ontario. It's the first ones that were protected. And so all of that blasting will then dilute that protected water and create blockages and endanger all the species in the area. So that's a really important issue that we have to keep an eye on and maintain our regular strikes, protests, petitions, and activists in the City Hall, and talk to your councillors about this issue and write to them, because that direct communication really puts pressure on them and lets them know what the community is thinking.
Absolutely.
So next, we also have, I'd like to know your thoughts on the current provincial government. It's the big one.
Yeah, where to start there, right? It's, I think it's been dubbed the cut first, think later government, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a very good way of phrasing it, because they just seem to rush, head first into any single thing that they've ever tackled. And
we all saw those license plates.
Yes. What an absolute disaster. Right from the stickers that wooden stick to
Yeah.
the license plates that can't be seen.
Yeah.
It's one unmitigated disaster after the other, whether it's also the cuts to education,
Mm-hmm.
to healthcare, to social services, including the basic income pilot, whether that's all the environmental protections that have been gutted. So this government seems to be just going for cuts, cuts, and cuts, but not trying to build anything. There's no new ideas introduced. There's
Absolutely.
no new big vision for Ontario introduced, and it's just a very angry, petty type of government that essentially seems to be for
The 1%.
exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't care about the rest of us at all,
Yeah.
or even the upper middle class, because we're talking about regular things that impacts their children. So I hope you check out also another video. I just went live from the street and I interviewed a bunch of teachers at the strike yesterday, and I talked to them all about, why are you striking? What does this mean to you? And a lot of the feedback was that it has nothing to do with money. They've actually lost more money than they're making because of how many days they've been off on strike, and that it saved the provincial government millions of dollars, but that they're here because of the children and our students, because they want to make sure that their class sizes don't increase to over 30 to potentially even 40 classes. That is an average. So if you look at a gym class, obviously is going to hold a lot more students than a science lab. And so these are not things that we can just put across the board. So one mother and teacher I was talking to yesterday, she taught grade 8, but her children were in high school. He had to take a mandatory class to get into university that was not offered at his high school. And she had to drive 20 minutes across town every day so he could go to a second high school to get this mandatory course in order to get to school. And they're really pushing e-learning, which not all courses are offered. So they push the privatized companies that offer these courses, which run at least $450 each. Right. So we're forcing our children already into spending money before they even get into post-secondary education. So
yeah, which
it's
is
absolutely
also
unacceptable.
Which is also an equity issue because it creates essentially two parallel systems of education, which is absolutely not something that we should be endorsing. And I mean, the entire agenda behind all of this is, we need to cut our deficit. And it's understandable. Sure, we need to cut our deficit. It's ballooning out of control. But at the same time, there's a way to do it. You can cut deficits by cutting services, or you can do it by increasing revenue. Now, there are different avenues out there which don't affect common people like you and I, but will, for example, Ontario has one of the lowest mineral extraction rates in the entire country. It's even lower than Saskatchewan, which has a conservative government right now. And we need to ensure that we can get back a certain return on our resources that isn't a pittance. And those kinds of innovative ideas exist out there, but this government is just about cuts and not about finding those innovative solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And job loss here locally as well, because there was supposed to be a new electric car company plant being built in Hamilton. And once the Ford government removed the subsidies and programs incentivizing people to purchase electric vehicles, which is something that we all need to get a move on, the car company pulled out because it didn't make sense for them to try and initiate a program that isn't being received well by the government.
Absolutely.
So there's definitely lots of issues with this government that are unfortunate and arise in every aspect of our lives. I mean, we touch on the license plate. Everybody, no matter who you are, you've been impacted in some way by this government. And that's what a lot of people think, that the personal isn't political. But everything you do every day is decided by a politician on whether it's allowed to be implemented, on whether it's funded or subsidized and legal. So that's why the everyday actions, and I want people to think about that on this channel. It's something that I really want to push, is that when people say like, oh, I don't do politics, I'm not a political person, but your employer is political, your owner of your home, if you rent, is political, and so they take that advantage and then they use it against you. So when you go to the bank and they are allowed to increase rates based on a non-regulated government, these are all things that directly impact you, decided by politicians. And so that's why all the different personal aspects of your life you need to think about on a day-to-day basis and really talk to the people in power and push of what your incentive and agendas are. And so speaking of personal being political, can you please tell me about, you've run in previous elections, can you tell me about not only being a young person, but a person of color in politics in this day and age?
All right. Well, I mean, you brought up a great point. I think, when people say they're not interested in politics, I always say, well, politics is always interested in you.
Mm-hmm.
Every single facet of your life is governed by who is in power.
Yes.
And even not being political is a political choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think it's important for people to understand that and to be able to come to grips with it, because this is a democracy, and in order for it to work, you have to be active and engaged all the time, not just
Absolutely.
during elections. But to your question, as a young person of color in politics, it's a bit of a challenge, obviously, but at the same time, I find that it's becoming a little easier
Yeah.
every day. And it's because of other people of color who have sort of blazed those trails. Even in the Green Party itself, we have so many different people coming up in leadership positions, including Annamie Paul, who's running for the GPC leadership.
Mm-hmm. She will
And
be on later on this YouTube channel.
okay,
Hopefully,
fantastic.
within a few weeks, we'll release that content.
Right. I mean, as much as I disagree with Jagmeet Singh, he's still out there as essentially an icon for, people of color in politics. But every single person who participates and sees someone who looks like themselves
Mm-hmm.
out there is another step towards a more inclusive and a more just society. I find that it's a very challenging thing to enter it, because politics is a pretty small community. It's a
Yeah.
pretty small and sometimes exclusive club. And it's hard when you are not part of the milieu of the people there, and essentially to kind of find a place in there. So I was very flattered and have great gratitude for the Green Party of Ontario for electing me as their deputy leader, because again, that shows the kind of inclusive space that this party has created. And at the same time, it's important to recognize that we have a long way to go as well, because if you look at the demographics of any political party, especially the leadership positions, they're still held predominantly by Caucasian, tends to be males.
And old.
Yeah, and of the older generation, absolutely. So it's important that younger people, people of color, women, people in the LGBTQ community, any kind of minorities get more involved in politics, because that way you are being a voice for your community, but also a voice for those who don't have that voice. And so it's a privilege and a challenge, and I think I have a lot to learn in this role, but I also have a lot to share and teach. So it's been a journey, essentially, and looking forward to what comes next.
Yeah, so I think that, especially for our viewers, everybody's passionate about something. So if you take a look online, see what's going on locally, if there's a different aspect in your community, a project that you want to work on, just try to champion it. Try to go to events that are already happening, meet people, and get connected. So especially becoming a politician in a no one in my family's ever run politically. I don't know, before this past federal election, I didn't know any other politicians personally. And so I had to just jump in with my eyes closed and try to get involved. So I started out back in April, just going to climate change is the most important thing to me. And so going to the Fridays for Future rallies, and then going to the pipeline protests, and just really building up and networking within your community and meeting other community activists. And then that allowed me through that network to then create my own events and invite them. And so it really spirals into petitions and then creating your own protests, and it just allows you to get involved. And so I just want to really encourage you guys to go out there, and whatever you're passionate about, whether you're just making an online page about it, or you actually go into your community, it's important that we can all be political and we can all create new things. And so that's what I hope you guys try out and challenge yourselves to work on this year. And so last but not least, what do you believe the future for the Green Party is, and what do you hope for the next election.
Right. Well, let's recap what happened in 2019 with the federal race. People, had expected a lot more from the Greens, but essentially what happened was we were crippled by a very rigged and broken system. Firstly, we got the same amount of votes as the Bloc Québécois, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's proportionately about the same votes, but they got 30 seats, we got 3. And that is an inherent injustice, unfairness that exists within our system, which is the first past the post system.
Yeah.
And so a more proportional representation is something that we need now in order to fix any problems that exist out there.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the reasons why status quo parties are so bad at dealing with these challenges that are coming up, whether that's climate change, whether that's economic disparities, is because their entire genesis is based in another century. Their structures, their leadership mentalities are essentially rooted in the 20th century. So you need a new party with a new way of thinking, with new bold ideas to be able to champion those ideas. And that's what the Greens are. They are innovative, they are resourceful, and they provide out-of-the-box kind of solutions. And also, a lot of the times, we are about criticism, but we're about constructive criticism. So whenever you see other opposition parties just curse the Ford government, they don't come up with their own solutions to what they would do differently. But every time Mike speaks against Premier Ford, he always says what the Greens would do differently, and that's about positive criticism. That's about coming up with your own solutions.
Exactly.
And which is why we're seeing great growth right here in Ontario as well. Ever since Mike was elected the first Green MPP, we were on election day at around 5% of the vote. But a recent poll just came out, and we've doubled our support essentially, and we're standing at 11% right now. So the growth of the Green Party of Ontario has been staggering, and people are noticing all the good work that's being done. So I have great hopes for the party, and definitely has a very incredible and prosperous future ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope you guys follow along. We're going to have other people coming onto the podcast within the next few weeks. We've got some teachers coming on. They're talking about the strikes and what's going on with the Ford government and cuts to education. We also have Don McLean coming on to talk about the Enbridge pipeline more specifically. And so we just really want to dive into these issues. And I hope this gave you a little glimpse into what we hope to have on the channel. We covered a lot of issues generally, and so we hope to dive into those. So thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that bell. So thanks for coming on.
Of course.